All right, so we're diving into personal accountability and societal blame today.
No, always a good one.
And we're going off of this YouTube video called If You Want to Win in 2025, Stop Playing Victim, Become the Hero of Your Story.
Okay.
And this is by Aquarius Wave.
Interesting.
Now, this creator, he doesn't really hold back in this one.
Right.
He was born and raised in a third world country.
Oh, wow.
Before he came to the U.S.
Okay.
So it's really interesting how his background plays into this video.
Yeah.
It's like a mix of self-help and societal critique.
You know?
And also some personal stories sprinkled in.
I like it.
And one of the things that really struck me right away was how he talks about power.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that believing you're not in control, like that you can't affect change in your own life, is really damaging.
I see.
Like incredibly damaging.
Okay.
In fact, he says,
what does he say?
This is the most detrimental beliefs that one can hold.
Ooh.
When you have or hold a belief system, that you are not able to take personal accountability or responsibility over your life. It strips your own personal power.
Wow, what a statement.
Right. It's strong.
It is bold.
And it goes right to the core of this whole thing.
Yeah.
This feeling of being powerless, being a victim.
Right.
It can actually prevent us from reaching our goals.
Like we're giving up our control.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're giving away our agency.
Okay.
And he's not afraid to call out this,
what
he sees as a culture of victimhood.
Interesting.
Especially among some, affluent individuals.
Oh, really?
He says there's a disconnect between advocating for certain policies and really understanding their impact.
I see. So like what kinds of policies?
Well, he uses the example of defund the police.
Oh, okay.
He argues that many of the people advocating for it don't actually live in the communities most affected by crime.
That's a really interesting point.
It is. It's a complex issue for sure. And I appreciate how he brings up those potential unintended consequences.
Right.
It makes you think about how personal responsibility intersects with, systemic problems.
Definitely.
Like, are we sometimes so focused on the system that we lose sight of our own agency within it?
That's a great question.
It's a tough one.
It is.
And he also goes after what he calls woke ideology.
Okay.
Suggesting that it can sometimes lead to this sense of moral superiority without real action or understanding.
Okay.
So, it's like maybe sometimes people are just talking the talk and not walking the walk.
Right. That makes sense.
And this all ties back to his personal story.
Oh, how so?
Well, coming from a third world country, gave him a really unique perspective on privilege.
Right. I could see that.
He talks about seeing people in the U.S. taking basic things for granted, things that other people struggle for every single day.
That must have been quite an eye-opener.
It was, you can tell. From the way he talks about it, it really shaped his worldview.
I bet.
And he seems to be urging us to recognize and appreciate what we have and to use that privilege to empower ourselves and others.
It's a powerful message for sure.
Yeah. And he's not just talking about these big societal issues.
Right.
He gets really specific about how this lack of personal responsibility plays out in everyday life.
Like what?
Well, he talks about things like,
okay,
people having multiple kids with different partners and then blaming their employers for their financial struggles.
Right. So it's about recognizing those choices and how they contribute to our situation.
He doesn't sugarcoat it at all.
No, he doesn't.
He wants us to confront our behaviors and the stories we tell ourselves.
And sometimes those stories aren't really true.
Right.
It's easier to blame someone else than to look at ourselves.
Yeah, and that's where the psychology comes in.
Oh, how so?
Well, there's this natural human tendency to put the blame on something outside of ourselves.
Right.
It's easier to point the finger
way easier
than to really look inward.
Yeah.
But that can create this cycle of powerlessness.
Right, you get stuck.
Exactly.
So how do we get out of that?
Well, that's what we'll talk about next.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
He's basically saying we need to take back our power,
It's like instead of being scared of messing up. He's saying we should embrace those mistakes as valuable lessons.
Like learn from our failures.
Exactly. And he uses this analogy of our muscles.
Okay.
Like if we don't use them, they get weak, they atrophy.
Right.
He says the same thing happens with personal accountability.
Interesting.
Like if we don't practice taking responsibility, our ability to do it actually weakens.
So we get out of practice.
Totally. It's like we become so used to blaming everything else that we forget how to recognize our own agency.
It's almost like we're giving away our decision-making power.
Yeah, to the government, our bosses.
Anyone but ourselves.
Exactly. And he's pretty critical of that.
I bet.
He even uses the term zombified state.
Wow.
to describe what happens when we just passively go through life blaming everyone else.
That's a pretty intense image.
It is. He wants us to wake up, step out of that autopilot mode, and actually become conscious creators of our own lives.
So how do we do that?
Well, he says a big part of it is realizing where we're placing our trust.
Okay, that makes sense.
He uses this analogy about employers.
Okay.
He says something like, if you put your life in the hands of a quote-unquote employer, and you expect that person to care more about your career, more about your finances, etc., than you do, that is a foolish decision.
Oh, wow.
It's like,
so who's really in charge?
Right. It's a wake-up call for sure.
Yeah.
We can't expect other people to care more about our well-being than we do.
Sure.
It's like, think about it.
Okay.
You could have the best doctor in the world, but ultimately, it's your responsibility to make those healthy choices.
It is. You have to take ownership.
Exactly. He's reminding us that we have agency. It doesn't mean rejecting support or being alone.
Right.
It's about actively participating in shaping our lives.
Instead of just letting things happen to us.
Yeah, not just passively accepting whatever comes our way.
Got it.
And he even ties all this back to leadership.
Oh, interesting.
And not just like the traditional kind.
Like what?
He says, if you're not willing to take accountability over what happens in your household, you ain't no damn man. You ain't no damn leader. You're playing cosplay.
Wow.
He's pretty straight up about it.
He is, but it makes you think.
It does. He's talking about self-leadership, like owning your choices and your actions.
In all areas of life.
Yeah, starting with your own personal space.
It's a good point.
And it's funny because he actually filmed this whole video on Christmas Day.
Oh, really?
He even mentions it. He's like, I could be outside lounging, but I've got a mission, a purpose.
He's putting his money where his mouth is.
Right. Leading by example.
Totally.
And he keeps coming back to this idea of not blaming others.
Okay.
He asks, how am I going to blame somebody for the money I didn't make, for the things I didn't do?
That's a good question.
It is. It really makes you stop and think.
It does.
And then he brings up this idea of transmuting all energy.
Okay. What does that mean?
It's like he's saying that even negative experiences, like fear or failure, can actually be transformed into something positive.
Wow. That's a powerful concept.
Like turning lemons into lemonade.
Yeah, but deeper than that.
Right. It's not just about positive thinking.
No, it's about using those challenges to move forward.
And you can feel that energy in his words.
Oh, yeah.
He's not just talking about it.
Yeah.
He's living it.
It's like that line.
Which one?
You know, when he says, I'm not going to blame someone for the money I didn't make, for the things I didn't do.
Oh, yeah. It's like he's taking ownership.
Totally.
Owning those consequences.
Exactly.
And he seems to be saying that this is how we achieve real freedom.
How so?
He says, let go of the need to blame, and I promise you, you will free yourself.
Powerful stuff.
Right? It's like blame keeps us stuck.
Yeah, trapped in that negativity.
And when we take responsibility,
then we can finally create the life we want.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
It really has. Aquarius Waves video just makes you think.
It does. It makes you look inside and examine your own beliefs.
About personal responsibility.
Yeah, it's complex.
It is. There's this interplay between individual choices and the systems around us.
Right. But Aquarius Wave gives us a framework
to navigate it all.
And to all of you listening.
We hope this deep dive has given you something to think about.
As you go forward, think about how your perspective on personal responsibility
might impact how you approach challenges
and opportunities.
What can you take ownership of today
to start building that life you envision?